What is going on, my friends, and welcome back to the Crypto Catch Up. Of course, your number one place to catch up on crypto. Now, today we're going to be taking a look at what's going on in the market, as well as the fact that we did just get some really damn good whale news that just shows the conviction that the whales have, which we'll talk about in a little while here. And so with that said, of course, let's not waste any more time at all, and let's get a feel for where the market is at to begin our week. Now, what we can see here is that things have definitely slowed down over the last 24 hours, but all in all, last week we're looking pretty good. Bitcoin's still maintaining above 60k, currently sat around 63.5. Ethereum still above 2500, currently sat around 2700. BNB maintaining 500, Solana maintaining 150, XRP maintaining 50, Doge maintaining 10. I mean, we're looking pretty damn good. Now, the only one that has been struggling, of course, this week has been Toncoin, quite simply because, of course, the CEO of Telegram did get arrested, leading this thing to see a nasty little pullback there. But outside of Ton, I mean, the majority of our top 10 cryptos have been looking pretty damn good the last week. Now, zooming into, of course, outside of the top 10, what we can see is, yes, the week has been looking good. We can see Popcat, FET, STX, SATs, and many of our smaller altcoins really outperforming this week, which is interesting, right? Usually in times in which we have been in which things have been a little uncertain, people have not been so sure about what's going on, usually we do see the market favor some things like, your bigger ones, right? Maybe even not your top 10s, but more like your Renders or your JASMYs, those types, right? Whereas, no, not really, right? We're seeing a lot of growth between, the SEIs, the WIFs, and the beams and the nears, and I do like to see it, right? Because it does show that there is conviction all the way through and through the market, and I do like to see it. And as I mentioned before, the last day has been a little bit ugly. We have been seeing over the last 24 hours things pulling back, but again, overall, not nearly enough to counter all the growth that we've seen over the last week. Now, going out towards some of our different indicators that we really like to use here on the channel, let's take a look at crypto fear and greed. As you can see here, we're currently sat at 55, which is neutral, but getting ever so closer to greed, right? I told you all, though, in those moments in which we were in fear and extreme fear, that's when we were doing purchasing. That's when we were buying. In moments like this where we're creeping towards greed, I definitely kind of take my foot off the gas a little bit. I don't do too much because, again, when people get greedy, I get a little bit worried. And so because of that, seeing us getting closer and closer to greed definitely doesn't make me feel like we could be in a spot to where the market's just, in the short and midterm, it's probably just not the best time to be purchasing. And some other things we're going to look at in a second here do align with that. But again, in the grand scheme of things, I do still think it's a good time to buy in the big picture for the long term, which our news is going to add on to that as well. Now, what you can see here is that in the last few weeks, or the last few days, sorry, I mean, things have really picked back up. And this like knee-jerk reaction shit is so annoying to me, right? When we plummet to the downside and everyone's so scared, then we take back off to the upside and everyone's greedy. It's just annoying. And that's the type of volatility and emotional volatility that leads people to lose a ton of money and get liquidated. Now, speaking of liquidations, we're seeing even more uncertainty happening over on liquidations, especially in the short term. What you can see here is that on the dailies, we're seeing just as many liquidations nearly to the downside as to the upside. The green line represents the amount of liquidations that'll happen if the price goes up. The red line represents the amount of liquidations that will happen if the market goes down. And what you can see here is, although there are more that will happen if this market pushes up, it definitely is getting a lot more close than it used to be, right? We used to see such a huge differential where it's evening out, and it's even evening out on the 30-day as well. It's not all the way there, and of course more will happen to the top side than to the upside, but again, it's getting close. And this type of uncertainty, people not really knowing where this market's going, definitely puts me in a spot to where it's like, okay, in the short term, maybe we need to be a little bit careful. Now, the biggest indicator of that is the 7-day. On the weeklies, there are a substantially higher amount of liquidations that will happen if this market moves to the downside than to the upside. And when I see stuff like this, I definitely pay attention to it, because you look at it, right? $57,000 brings tons of liquidations. If we hit back to 57K, all of these liquidations will happen. And if we do just quite simply look at Bitcoin's price, that's not all that unrealistic to say, right? Bitcoin doing something like, say, this in a moment like this, the fact that this little bitty move could liquidate that many people, yeah, I definitely feel like it's a possibility. It's something that's out on the table. And so that's what I'm saying. Although in the long term, I think Bitcoin's going to break out of this thing and take off. We're going to see that move eventually up towards 80, 90, 100K. I do think it's going to happen one day. In the short term, things are looking uncertain to me. And as more and more people get greedy, I get a little bit more nervous and I kind of calm down. I do some trading still. I do still do some buys, but nothing too crazy. Now, guys, don't forget, if you do want to do some trading, you can check out my Margex link down below. You don't need a VPN. You don't even need the KYC, meaning anyone in the world can trade no matter where they are. And on top of that, you're going to get up to $10,000 in bonuses. So I did link that down below. But overall, as I mentioned before, the market's feeling a little bit uncertain to me. I'm not quite sure where this market's going to go. And of course, because of that, I definitely am kind of just pulling back a bit, not doing too much. But as I mentioned before, in the long term, I still think things are looking very good. In the long term, I still think that we're looking very, very bullish. My conviction is extremely high, and a part of that reasoning is because of what we have just been seeing recently. One of the big pieces of news that I wanted to share with you today is that Bitcoin ETF inflows just hit an all-time high this week. Friday saw the biggest inflow into spot Bitcoin ETFs in months, with a massive $252 million net inflow. Now, of course, what you can see here, since we did see the launches of the ETFs, things have been steadily climbing, but we have seen these little moments where we're pulling back, especially as the price itself does kind of pull back a little bit. But what's absolutely beautiful to see is that as we did start to get towards the bottom side of this move, and as we did start to see the whales really start to pick up activity and momentum, we absolutely conquered that previous all-time high, smashing up again $250 billion worth of inflows just on Friday. Absolutely ridiculous. And considering the fact that we are still seeing the market below 60 or $65,000, it just goes to show me that in the long term, these accumulations ought to pay out. Now, to break this down and where a lot of these different inflows are coming from, we actually did see a lot of news coming from the Eastern Asia side. What we can see here, Hong Kong Bitcoin ETF surpassed HK $2 billion in assets under management. China is getting prepared. Now, on top of that, what we saw is that Hong Kong ETF issuers are calling on South Korea to approve Bitcoin ETFs as well, because they are trying to see that, of course, spread again around that Eastern Asian area. And of course, as we have seen time and time again, Asia has a massive influence. We've seen the bans, we've seen the unbans. When things are good, things are great. When things are bad, things are terrible. And it seems like we're in a moment in which things are good, and it seems like they are really trying to embrace crypto for a change this time around. Although I don't particularly believe all the news that I see, I do like the fact that we are really starting to see the ETFs gain a ton of momentum there, because it allows people to access Bitcoin. And of course, it's just great for decentralization in the sense of the world, right? We're not seeing all of the crypto holders being in one place. We're seeing that kind of separated out, although ETFs may not be the best way to accomplish that goal, right? But overall, we are seeing a ton of activity in terms of ETFs there. Absolutely beautiful. Now, we actually did get the digital asset fund flows weekly report from our friends over at CoinShares, and what we can see is that last week was a damn good one. If we do break this down across the different companies or the different ETFs, we saw the iShares ETF bringing in $346 million worth of inflows last week, being countered a little bit by Grayscale's or GBTC's negative $189 million, but again being picked back up by Fidelity's $88 million, ARC21 shares $84 million, and then of course other coming in at a $163 million inflow, absolutely smashing it. Now, of course, the majority of that was in Bitcoin. We did see a ton of Ethereum movement when it first launched, but of course, Bitcoin is going to be the one that the Bitcoin ETF is going to probably be the most popular one forever, just over a long period of time. I can't really imagine that changing anytime soon. So, of course, $543 million worth of inflows for Bitcoin there. Only negative 35 for Ethereum. Solana coming in basically break even. Multi-asset at 20 as well. So, a ton of good movements here from the whales. A ton of good movements from the ETFs. And I've said it time and time again. When you're seeing these ETFs moving like this, when you're seeing this big money starting to flow into it, especially in times where we're not in green, we're not in extreme greed, right? Things are still a little bit uncertain. It is a good sign for the long term, because it means even in these moments like this where the market is worried and retail investors are worried, institutions aren't worried. And at the end of the day, you have to accept the fact that the likelihood is here. Crypto is probably manipulated extremely hard, right? And so knowing that the people who are behind pulling those strings to some degree are still full of bullish conviction that this market will move upwards to the extent in which they're putting hundreds of millions and billions of dollars into crypto, it's a good sign that those of you like, those of us like me and you, we're probably going to get paid off really well for a lot of these purchases that we've been doing, especially while Bitcoin and Solana and ETH were all struggling just a few weeks ago in extreme fear, which was absolutely ridiculous. So it definitely feels as if things are moving in a great direction here. It seems like the bullish conviction over the long term is still there. I'm still confident that in the long term we are going to see an absolute ton of growth. But as I mentioned before, the short term is getting a little bit iffy, so I'm not doing too much currently. I'm just more sitting back waiting and watching. And so, of course, I hope you guys did enjoy this quick update on what's going on, not only just with the whales, but a little bit more fundamental analysis and a little tiny technical analysis as well. Definitely let me know how you guys feel. Guys, also, I did recently just start doing some altcoin analysis here on the channel. Altcoin markets. I did one on Solana specifically. I'm planning on doing one about JASMY, maybe some Render, maybe some Ton. Let me know down in the comments below. What are some of your favorite altcoins that you'd like me to start covering here on the channel when we do our quick catch-ups here on the Crypto Catch-Up? But of course, I hope you guys did enjoy a ton, and I can't wait to see you all next time. Peace out, everybody.